For our listeners out there today, we have a school friend of mine. His name is Karan Chauhan. He's a pro MMA fighter, and we're just going to get to know him a little bit today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Thank you. Just a streak of injuries lately, but I'm getting through it, pushing through it the best I can.
But I think when you're doing MMA, I think injuries is just
it's synonymous to the sport.
It's. I think it's a part of it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Like working through injuries like this, you kind of have to strike a balance between trying to be tougher than you actually are and being tougher than the situation. So if you try to be tougher than the situation itself, you tend to lose. You tend to lose to that situation, and you lose to yourself more than anything. So I've just been trying to find that balance, and growing up has always just been about finding a balance in trying to balance that crazy and trying to balance real life. So that's kind of what I'm navigating right now.
So for our listeners out there who don't know what MMA is, can you tell us what is MMA, and can you give us a little detail about the sport?
So anybody that watches the UFC or knows what the UFC what the UFC is about knows that MMA is a sport that encompasses every single type of martial arts into one sport. As compared to fighting in a ring, you're fighting in a cage. As compared to putting 10 or 8 ounce gloves on with those pillows on your hands like they do, like they have in boxing, you have 4 ounce gloves that look like biker gloves almost, but with very minimal padding in it. So it's a sport that will teach you to fight a lot more definitively than any other combat sport will, because when you get into an actual fight, like let's say a fight in the street, you don't know where the fight is going to end up. You don't know if the fight is going to end up on the ground. You don't know if the fight is going to finish standing. But if it is going to be standing, you have to have a certain skill set to be able to be calm under that pressure.
Correct.
For me, MMA has always taught me to be calm under pressure, even in real life, even in physical confrontations that I've had outside of the ring, outside of my house, outside of a controlled environment in the gym. But I think MMA is something that everybody should do at least a few times in their lives to really, really understand what it really is.
And not compete, just train.
There's nothing I can say right now that will do it justice, because when you train it, you know that it's not like any other sport. The physical demands, the mental demands, especially the mental demands, because it will break you every day. MMA is not a sport that you can go in and have a good day every day with. Because if you do have a good day every day, you are in the wrong place.
Correct.
If you're not in a room with people that are better than you, you're definitely in the wrong
place.
And
I think it's about any sport, no?
It shines out. It shines a lot more clearly when you're in an MMA gym, because I've tried to play cricket, I've tried to play football, I've tried to do all of those things that involve a team and other people, and that also involves holding other people accountable to your success.
Correct.
The thing with an individual sport like MMA is all that pressure is on you. You can have a bunch of teammates, you can have the best coaches in the world, best strength and conditioning, best everything, but when it comes down to it and that cage door locks, you are the only one standing across that opponent and a referee in between to hopefully pull that opponent off of you if you're losing, or the other way around.
Correct.
But you are in there alone, so you need to be able to learn to control that aspect of yourself, which is also something I'm navigating right now. I haven't had a lot of success with it, but that's what growing up is.
So like you said, it encompasses all martial arts. So MMA stands for mixed martial arts.
Correct.
So what are the different kinds of martial arts that come under the bracket of MMA?
Immediately, if somebody has to look at an MMA fight, they'll notice that every fight starts standing. So it encompasses boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai, because you're allowed to throw elbows and knees as well. And then chaining those with takedowns from wrestling, submissions from jiu-jitsu, a lot of sequences combining ground and pound from sports like Sambo, combat Sambo from Russia. Off the top of my head, these are the immediate martial arts that you should know certain aspects of to do well in an MMA fight.
Correct. Yeah. I think the learning is never ending.
Never.
You can just keep going deep into...
It's like doing maths, right? Like in school, you have to do it every day to be good at it. Unless you have a natural aptitude for it. And with MMA, nobody can have a natural aptitude for it, because you have to show up every day, and that's the only way you do better.
Correct.
So,
makes sense. So, at what point did you decide that, okay, now I want to get into MMA, or this is what I'm going to pick as a career choice? Or
subconsciously, I think ever since I was 10 years old and I started boxing when I was in school, I always knew that this is the only thing that I'm ever going to do. But breaking it to my parents was a whole different battle on its own, because I don't know about how much people know about my life, but I come from a very protective, possessive family that always told me that I didn't have to do this to make a living, and I didn't have to do this to be able to survive in the world. There were other avenues for me to be successful, earn money, live a very cushioned, comfortable life. I did the having jobs and everything, but it sucked the soul out of me in a very non-fun way, and it was it made me die very, very slow. It was killing me very slowly, and I was going through a very slow, painful death doing that and doing what everybody around me was telling me to do. Little backstory to that is because in school I never really did well. I wasn't cut out for the ICSC curriculum, and that mentally kind of broke me going through life. But boxing and combat sports is something that always brought me back and gave me that confidence. So it's a no-brainer in my head. But I decided to do MMA full time when I was 20, and I started competing as a full time amateur at a national level. Every time I competed, I proved to my parents that I was able to do it. And the start that I have now to my pro career, I've got 2 wins and 4 losses. It's not a very good record. But my amateur career also had more or less the same start, where I had 2 straight losses at the beginning of my amateur career. And everybody that I was fighting was either older than me, because I started doing this when I was 18. It's when I was allowed to fight as an amateur, as a senior. But I had 2 straight, I went through 2 straight losses. I got 1 win. I picked up another loss. So that kind of mentally broke me. And that was the year of 2018. When I came back in 2019 and I fought in my amateur nationals, I had just taken the whole year of 2018 off to be able to train and reset my brain and be able to be comfortable in those uncomfortable spots. And that's all I was training myself to do, because every time I lost, I just felt uncomfortable in the cage. And I think that's what's happening again now, but I'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
I went from 0-2 as my record to 11-4, and in 11 months of competing consistently as an amateur, I qualified for Team India. At 15 years old, I had made a promise to myself that I would make it to an Olympic level of some sport that I was in. Whether it was boxing, whether it was kickboxing, taekwondo, anything like that that I was doing and I was dabbling in all those years to be able to find my niche. But MMA stood out for me, and in 11 months between January and November was the World Championships in Bahrain, and I picked up as many wins as I did. Do the math, but I don't know, it was a very weird thing for me, because from being unranked and unrecognized in the country to being one of the top prospects in the country at the time as an amateur was a huge deal for me. I just lived the dreams that I had dreamed of since I was 15, and I kept a promise that I made to myself, and it made me realize that through MMA I was able to keep a lot of promises to myself. So from there on, I did a lot better in life, in college, with my family. I tried to be a better son. I tried to be a better friend to everybody that I was with, and the few friends that I had, but I don't know. MMA always taught me to be grounded, even though I needed to conduct myself like a professional, and helped me separate myself from the pack. And the people that I hung out with growing up, everybody was partying, everybody was drinking, smoking, and they made that their entire life. And before they knew it, they were 25 and they were stuck in these jobs that they hated, relationships they hated, living in a way where everybody was telling them what to do and they couldn't do a fuck about it, because all they knew was listening to everybody else and never listening to themselves. MMA took me away from that. MMA made me listen to myself a little more and stand there and prove to the whole world that I was able to do what I said I would do. And today here we are. I was Pune's first pro MMA fighter. I made my professional debut in 2022, a little after my 24th birthday. But no regrets, man. Like this pro MMA thing has been the hardest thing I've ever done. Mentally taxing. I've lost people in my life. I've lost fights. I've lost to myself most times, but I'm still here. So if it's taught me that I can't be perfect, it's taught me that I can be undeniable.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a long way to go as well.
And if a person like me that got such bad marks in school and was told by every teacher in school that he's not going to be shit when he grows up, to be able to stand here and talk to the world about what I do, it's a privilege on its own. So
100%.
When I talk about these things, I get to talk about it as a professional MMA fighter that I kept telling everybody I was going to be. So today I'm living those dreams, even if those dreams aren't perfect.
Yeah.
You have to learn gratitude for what you do.
100%, yeah.
Definitely.
So let's break down the journey a little bit. So you started off boxing when you were 10 years old. What got you into the ring the first time?
So I used to get bullied in school. That's why I started boxing. I went to complain to my mother one day about these kids bullying me in school, and she happened to be with her uncle that day, who was a boxer in the Merchant Navy. And this is at the time a 70-year-old man who had very rudimentary skills in boxing and used to box, on the ship that he was in. And through learning just how to throw a jab and a cross, I won 2 gold medals in 2 years in school. And the first bout that I ever fought was against the guy that used to bully me.
Yeah.
And I got him out of there in 30 seconds. He was a year older than me, and he was a boarder in school, and we were from the same school. So you know how the borders are with all the day
Yeah,
scholars. They
yeah.
think that we're soft, and that was one way to physically and definitively prove that I wasn't soft.
Correct, correct.
And when I saw success with that, and I saw success with being consistent at something, that's what made me continue doing boxing. But fast forward to 11th grade, where your problems also kind of change as your life changes. I was sitting in the cafeteria in Bishop's Camp with one of my friends, and another boarder, particularly stronger, more aggressive than the last bully, slapped me in front of the whole cafeteria when I tried to stand up for one of my friends, or I tried to tell my friends to shut the fuck up. But I was caught in the crossfire of that, and I got slapped in front of all of those girls, all of those teachers, and the fact that there were teachers there who did nothing made me realize that I was like, okay, I'm not going to give off this sense about myself where people think that they can come and fuck with me anymore. And it was not an ego thing for me at that time. It was just I don't want to feel weak in front of everybody. So my friend Karthik, he took me to my first MMA class with Mr. Ismail Haji, and on the first day I got probably more hammered than I've ever been hammered in my life in boxing. I have over 100 fights in boxing as an amateur boxer, but I've never been beat up like I did, like I was on the first day in my MMA class. Because the first time you eat a leg kick and you've never eaten a leg kick in your life, the first time you eat a leg kick, every time you sit down to take a shit, you think about it because it starts hurting. Every time you try to chew food because you've been punched with a 4-ounce glove, your jaw is too swollen to chew that food, so you're just painfully swallowing all that food. So these are very clear lessons that you can't ignore, that nature won't let you ignore. And like that bully in school did so many good things for me in the long run, this bully for me has made me everything and more that I am today.
Yeah.
So, and he knows who he is. Like, he's watching, he watches everything I do, he likes everything I do. And he knows I'm talking about him.
Yeah.
He knows the kind of fighter he's created. I am this guy that knows that, bad things can happen to people, and I train like it every day. And my mentality now, thanks to being beaten in actual competitions, fighting real fighters with a lot of integrity, it makes you grow up in a way where nothing else ever will. Like, I could have been stuck in a job at an MNC somewhere, never growing, going to party after that every night, trying to learn how to socialize with people, and I have terrible social anxiety, so it was always a battle for me to be able to go out and do things. Like, even coming for this podcast today, I was like, fuck, are there going to be too many people there? How am I going to be able to open up and talk about these things? But once I start talking about what I love doing and what shaped my life, I walk away from these conversations having a whole new appreciation for myself. So my sport from every walk of life has always reminded me that, okay, chalo, you are worth it in some way. You are worth it in some way. A lot of people in sports are going to feel like that. No matter 100%. What level you make it to, even if you're a national champion. I was one of the first national champions in amateur MMA from Pune. And that still didn't sit well with me because it's a sport that makes your goals always be bigger. And even now, even though I'm not at a very, very high level as a professional, I know that this is a sport that would have broken a lot of different people that would have done it, that broke me in school. So I wear that like a chip on my shoulder, and I wear that like a badge of honor. And I walk through life every day knowing that I'm a fighter.
Yeah. And so you said you had a couple of jobs that you did that sucked the life out of you.
Yeah.
So what was the decision to first start with a job, and then kind of how did that transition into, okay, now I want to be a professional I have done a little bit of martial arts. I have gone for MMA classes, but it's never made me feel, okay, now I want to be a professional MMA fighter. So when did the decision come about where you were like, okay, enough of 9 to 5, office life doesn't suit me, but I'm going to become a fighter. So when did that happen? And was it like one day that it happened, or the decision happened overnight, or?
As I said, subconsciously it was always in my brain that, okay, I'm going to do this at a high level. One day I didn't know that it was all I was going to be doing.
Yeah.
The decision to make it all I'm doing came when I was about 3 fights into my pro career, and I knew that, okay,
in your amateur career or your pro?
No, in my amateur career. Sorry, in my professional career.
Okay.
To do this full time and say fuck it to everything else and do only this and want to make it to the UFC. Even today, my goal is not to just be some surviving MMA fighter like I am right now.
Yeah.
I am like a dog with a bone chasing my dreams in the UFC, and so are maybe 50,000 other guys from around the world.
Correct.
Much more deserving guys, better than me, younger than me, but they don't have the story I'm going to tell. And it's not just the fighter with the coolest story, but it's the fighter that fights every circumstance outside the cage and is still able to make it there and do do a good job on fight night, because that's all that matters. Like, you can have a shit life outside of fighting, but once you're in that cage, all your effort is there for the world to see. So you better believe in what you're saying, and you better believe in your dreams. But to answer your question finally about when this became a full-time thing for me, I used to work these jobs. I used to get up and go to these jobs every day. So
what was the job profile?
So I've worked in real estate for a couple of years, and after that, for 2 years, I worked in logistics and supply chain management.
Okay.
Now it's exactly as boring as it sounds.
Okay.
It's got no disrespect to anybody that does those things. My parents and my sister, they work in real estate. Briefly, I did too, but it was always having to be extremely nice to people, be extremely cordial, no matter how late somebody showed up, no matter how disrespectful somebody was. And to me, those things don't sit very well with me. Like I said, it's not a thing about ego, it's just the kind of sport that I was raised in, and this sport has raised me more than any good influences, bad influences ever have. So I always knew that this was a very pure route to go down. Like, if you do everything right, you're going to be successful. If you do everything right and you do everything in a disciplined manner, you're going to be successful. If you're not, you're just not going to be successful at all. So I was 3 fights into my pro career, and my parents and I had a conversation. They were like, Karan, you're 24 years old. What the fuck do you want to do with your life? 25 maybe. It was earlier this year, so yeah, 25. They were like, Karan, what the fuck do you want to do with your life? And I know what it's like to have worked. I know what it's like to have tried to make my dreams of earning money and raising a family and being a good husband, being a good father maybe one day, come true through earning money like that, through a very definite form of earning money, through getting a very boring job, that mundanity that most people are okay staying in because they're okay distracting themselves when they have time, when they have time to themselves. They don't really like what's going on over here. And for me, I love what's going on in my brain, even if it's crazy, stupid thoughts. I know that that's what makes me me, and that's what lets me fight the way I fight. Nothing else in life has ever made me want to fight for it. You know what I mean? Figuratively speaking, literally speaking. I've always half-assed everything I've done. So the decision to do MMA full time, it's been very hard to believe in me as a fighter, if people have been following what I've been doing, because I've not had the most perfect career, but I know that I've showed up every single time I said I would. I've made weight like a professional every single time I said I would. And those are the things that are the bare minimum that I was priding myself on before. And the fact that I'm talking about it right now is because no one's been a harsher critic on me than I have. So when this decision came to of me becoming a pro fighter and a full-time MMA fighter, I had to battle my parents quite a bit. I had to battle every circumstance that told me that I didn't have to do this. That there are other ways.
What do you mean by battle with the parents?
They didn't want me to do it. And as every other athlete in today's day and age knows, from where you and I come from, our parents will always tell us to do the safer thing out of absolute concern. No parent is going to tell their kids, get in a cage and get your head broken and get choked by other people for a living. It's a crazy way to live. So I can only imagine the kind of emotional turmoil I've caused on my parents, telling them about this again and again. Today I can communicate these things to my parents because I have clarity on it. Before, it was always like, Mama, Papa, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And having no explanation, having no way of communicating to them that this is going to be my life for any good reason. Like even today, there's no good reason that I'm doing this. The only good reason in my head is that it keeps me accountable and it brings me back every single time. And I think that a lot of people need to do it to have a lot more clarity of themselves in real life. Because once you get punched in the face, all the fake bullshit you think about yourself will fly right out of your head. Right?
Yeah.
Everything becomes very real for that moment.
And I think anybody who's been in a fight,
even in a sparring session,
either on even on the street or in the ring,
exactly,
your whole perspective just changes.
You know, if you have that fight or flight instinct or that dog in you, right?
Yeah.
To me, naturally, that dog wasn't in me. I was a little bit of a bitch before.
Yeah.
But through training, through being consistent and trying to be the best version of myself I possibly can, it got me to the gym every day. And getting to the gym every day is like 60% of the effort, because some days you really don't feel like it. Like if you have social anxiety, mental health issues and stuff like that, it's very hard for somebody to be able to be part of a team, right? Socialize with the team, understand idiosyncrasies that other fighters have, other people have. Every fighter has their own story to tell, and everybody's constantly trying to tell their own stories, whether it's through their fighting, whether it's through just having conversations in the gym or not. To me, I keep maybe 3 people around in my life that I have these conversations with, maybe my sister, my girlfriend, and sometimes my dad, sometimes my mom, here and there. But very few people that I can talk to my personal life about. MMA taught me that no matter who you are, where you come from, you can talk to anybody about anything through fighting, through this language of fighting. Because there were these trainers that I used to train with in Thailand. They didn't speak a word of English, but I knew exactly what he was saying, and he knew exactly what I was trying to do because of that communication through movement.
Yeah,
You know, so
yeah.
this was the first time I realized that you don't need to talk to communicate with somebody
Correct.
or to talk to vibe to somebody. You
Yeah.
need to just be.
And I think that is one part which is highly misunderstood by a lot of people. Is it's called martial arts because it's an art form and it's not just fighting. Like any other art form, like when you talk about dancing, painting, there is expression through art. Like when you see a painting and you are, you know the emotion that an artist has painted it with.
Yeah.
Similarly, when you fight, there is a lot of communication that happens through movement.
Yeah.
And I think uh, Bruce Lee had done a lot of philosophy related to the art of fighting. And he got out this perspective that fighting is also an art form. And it's amazing that you brought it up because, like you said, you can communicate so many emotions without saying a word just
Yeah.
through movement.
Fighting isn't the raw barbaric thing people see it to be.
Yeah.
If you slow it down and you break it down and you understand what footwork is, you understand how what framing is, keeping your hands up, throwing a jab, understanding how a jab works,
Correct.
understanding what you can use that jab for. Now I've said the word jab like 4 times and it's just one movement.
Yeah.
Right? There's so many ways of communicating what you can do in fighting to somebody, even by talking to them about it. And only somebody that's done a couple of sessions of MMA or has fought or has competed knows what I'm talking about when I
Correct.
say this.
Correct.
Because if somebody's listening to somebody talking about MMA for the first time, this is going to sound fucking ridiculous.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Throwing a jab on somebody's nose, trying to break their nose with it. Like I get it. Like I've had to explain this to my parents so
Yeah,
many
yeah.
times where we're sitting at dinner with my parents' friends, and they're these 50, 55-year-old just uncles, aunties that talk about, so beta, what are you up to? Somebody sitting in the somebody sitting in that group says, oh, I just finished engineering. Somebody says, oh, I just finished a bachelor's in media.
I just finished breaking somebody's nose.
And Karan, what do you do? I'm a professional MMA fighter.
Yeah,
The smile
yeah.
that I have on my face every single time I say it is because my parents are just doing this every single
Yeah.
time I say it.
Yeah.
And that's something nobody's been able to take away from
Correct.
me. Right? And fighting gave me that. Fighting gave somebody that had absolutely zero personality. It gave somebody that had a ton of confidence issues the ability to walk through life and face an opponent, face a crowd. Like in my last fight, I didn't even know the severity of the situation that I was in. I went to Chennai to fight Chennai's hometown favorite, Naina Mohammed. He was my last amateur loss. Like in 2021, him and I fought the first time. He beat me by a very close split decision, but I knew that I had him hurt at the end of that fight. So going into that second fight, my confidence was extremely high, but my physicality just wasn't there. My mentality was there. I was 100% mentally ready, 100% ready to die trying to win that fight that day,
Yeah,
to try
yeah.
and get redemption. And I get finished in the second round because I had an MCL. It's not an excuse. If Naina's listening to this, bro, it's not an excuse. But I went into that fight with tons of injuries that I didn't want to acknowledge. Like, forget even realizing that I had them. I didn't even want to acknowledge them at the time.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of mental battle with yourself I was talking about at the start of this conversation. So there are all these good things to fighting, but then there's this dark side to it.
Correct.
I'm realizing about very slowly but surely now, and I have been going through it for the last 1.5, maybe 2 years. A bunch of things have played a huge role in me getting my health fucked up, like cutting weight the wrong way, rehydrating the wrong way. My nutrition wasn't as clean as an athlete should have been. My body didn't look like an athlete should have been, because I was neglecting a lot of things in my life, and I paid the price for it in the most literal way in front of everybody. The first 4 times I walked out to fight, because even in my first pro fight, when I made my pro debut, I was losing that fight till I finished the guy in the first round. But even then I knew, like, I didn't walk away from that fight feeling like it was an actual win, because I know that I got him with a good shot, and that's
Yeah.
what put him away.
Yeah.
But trying to recreate that mentality every single time going into a fight was the wrong thing to do. And there's so many things that I haven't even come to terms with even today, because the injuries continue to happen. The people continue to say, stop Karan, do something real, Karan, do something real, do something real. And over the last 2 years, I've heard that almost every single day of my life, whether it's been from people in my own house, whether it's been from people who have seen my fighting career decline or fly off a cliff, if people like to say that. But at the end of the day, I realized that I don't give a shit about what people say. And it's through having my own battles, having my own trials, having my own tribulations. Like I was talking about Chennai. When I've walked in to fight Kutti the second time, his nickname is Kutti. So when I walked in to fight him the second time, we were in a mall, and I was coming down the escalator, and my song started playing. Like my walkout song started playing. I picked a Tamil song, and I learned. I don't have a fuck of a clue of what that song means.
Yeah.
But I learned every word to that song to be able to sing it and amp myself up to be able to go fight.
Yeah.
And fight this guy in his home territory, singing a song in a language I don't know anything about, but this motherfucker understands everything I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah.
My mind went to this crazy place in that fight where I blocked out these couple of hundred people that were looking at me from different levels of this mall that we were fighting in, this dark black cage, this absolute killer standing in front of me, and just everybody was on his side. I heard no cheers for me, but in that moment everything was so silent, I didn't care. Every time I feel like everything is against me in the world, I go back to that feeling and knew that I didn't give a shit in that moment whether anybody was in my corner, not in my corner. I was going to move straight forward. And that's the feeling I had to carry into every day today. So fighting helps you grow up in that way, where you learn to handle adversity better than the average man. And it sounds very fancy when I'm saying it like this, but when you actually go through it, it's a really ugly process. My MCL gave out in the second round of that fight, and I got finished by a ground and pound. And even Kutti knew, like he was like, the referee looked at me, the referee was like, "Are you ready?" And in my head I was like, I guess I'm gonna find out. It wasn't even like, yeah, fuck yeah, I'm ready. It wasn't one of those situations. I was like, fuck it, let's go. It was one of those. And you're standing against everybody in that moment over there, and you realize that, fuck, I'm really doing this. Like, this is my life. This is what I've been talking shit about for the last so many years to my parents. This is the moment everything has built to. From every single fight in my life to here, this is what matters the most.
Yeah.
For these 15 minutes, everything else doesn't matter. And that's a feeling people go their entire lives without knowing.
Yeah.
And it's weird because people intentionally deny themselves of that because it's hard. I mean, it's really simple, but it's just that hard.
Yeah,
to do it.
yeah.
So.
Yeah. And like you said, you had like your nutrition was shit for a bit.
Yeah.
So what is it now?
For a bit, I mean, from ages 15 to 24.
Okay, that's not a bit then.
Yeah, that's most of my adolescent career. But when I say shit, I mean, I grew up in a Parsi house where everything is lathered in butter. Everything is, batasa biscuit, shrewsbury biscuit. Having an unhealthy amount of carbs and maida and stuff like that. I'm very happy I'm not diabetic. Like I'm very fortunate that I haven't ended up diabetic. But everything in my house is extremely lathered with oil and butter and masala and all of that stuff. And I never really made much of it because I was young. I was able to shed that weight off. I was able to work out and not feel the effects of it because I was just fueling my body. Food was not food for me. It was just fuel at that time.
Yeah.
So whatever was made at home was what I was trying to survive off of or trying to make a living out of. And my body reflected it. And for the last 2 years, I went down a path where I know that it might hurt my image from what I'm saying or whatever people say. But I started smoking and drinking because of certain things in my life. And I don't think I'm very proud of that, and I don't think that that's something anybody should go through as a professional athlete because it only takes away from you. It took away from my mentality. It took the fire away from me for some time, very indefinitely. I was speaking about these conversations that I keep having with people, my mom, my dad, my sister, my girlfriend. You can't face these people after a certain point after you've lost, right? You realize that the only person you can face is not even yourself, except your opponent in front of you. And when the only person you can face is an opponent and not the people that are most important to you, you know you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Right? That's what my life had come to, and that's what I was trying to battle out of for the longest time. And everybody from our city kind of falls prey to it, and they never fall out of it, where they get into this thing of drinking, smoking, partying, going home, going to work the next day again, and then repeating that whole thing. That's basically what was happening to me when I was living in Bombay, because moving to a new city, first of all, was extremely tough for me to deal with, because I'd lived at home my entire life, living alone in Bombay. Even though I was living in my grandfather's house in Bombay without him there, I was living alone. And after training, when you're battered, bruised, you kind of miss having company, and that's something that I didn't realize. Like,
and that feeling of walking into an empty house.
Yeah.
is quite shattering for most people, especially the first couple
It's
of.
like a shock, bro. Like it's like a culture shock because you're used to your mother shouting at you, used to your father,
something like just
used to your
activity
father,
in
like
the
stop
house.
fucking limping into the house every day, motherfucker. Like it's you're used to hearing something like that. You're used to your sister roasting you, and then you walk into a house where even the cat at the door in your building doesn't greet you properly. So that kind of took a toll on me very slowly but surely. And I've always prided myself on being very reclusive and not talking to people, but that was always while having somebody in the house. And I didn't realize
you had the option.
I was privileged enough to not know the difference between having somebody around me and not, right? And when you're privileged enough to do that, it also makes you fall down to earth much, much quicker and much, much harder, right? So some people come back from that, some people don't. I'm still trying to come back from that. I'm at home now indefinitely because of certain issues that I have personally, but I found a good winning formula now to start training again properly. Even though I've been hitting this injured streak, this injury streak with my legs, it's been very humbling learning to treat people a different way after I've been so selfish all of these years. Learning to not just do this because you're doing it for yourself and you're doing to prove something to yourself, but you're doing this because you're saying it's going to feed your family indefinitely one day. You're saying you're saying that your big dreams are going to stand between you being absolutely nothing and being everything you thought you would be. So when you put that kind of pressure on yourself, you need to be able to handle it, and you need to be able to recognize what you're talking about.
Yep. And so, like you mentioned a couple of times, there was an amateur and a pro.
Right.
So, what is the difference between the two?
Well, in amateur fights, the rule set is extremely different as compared to having a 5-minute round when you're fighting a professional bout. You fight a 3-minute round. You fight three-minute rounds like you would in professional boxing. The same, the same duration, only 3 rounds. You have 7-ounce gloves that are kind of like puffy MMA training gloves that I think you might have seen. You wear shin pads, and you're not allowed to throw elbows of any kind. You can only throw knees to the body. This is an amateur. You can only throw knees to the body, no knees to the head. And there are many submissions that involve spine manipulation and small joint manipulation. Like if you do a heel hook to somebody, that's reaping the knee. That's illegal in amateur MMA. If you neck crank somebody, that's manipulating their spine. So that's not allowed in amateur MMA because that affects the longevity of an amateur fighter's career. So they've adjusted the rule set for this amateur circuit for the longevity of fighters to be able to make it to a pro level. After that, in the pros, there's very few things that aren't allowed. There's just dirty things that aren't allowed, like eye gouging, kick to the balls, and any strikes to the spine. But all submissions go. It's you can throw elbows to the head. You can throw elbows on the ground. You can sit in somebody's guard and just throw elbows even off the bottom.
And really, you said 5 minutes.
And they're 5-minute rounds.
How many rounds?
3 rounds. 3 5-minute rounds, and for championship fights, it's 5 5-minute rounds. So it's 25 minutes of fighting.
Okay.
Yeah, and with 1 minute in between, for both amateur and pro.
Okay.
But yeah, that's the difference between amateur and pro.
And what does it take to get from an amateur to a pro?
You have to be a successful amateur fighter, which thankfully I was because of the effort I made all through college to be able to train and get to the gym. And this is where I felt consistency separated me from the pack in a lot of ways from a lot of people that were fighting amateur at the time in India, from Pune, because I went to Symbiosis, and that Symbiosis isn't very lenient with their attendance. So attending college to 75% was an absolute must, and that's something that I had to keep up with every day because I was still trying to have a life outside of fighting, where I knew that I needed something to fall back on. I needed a degree to fall back on. I needed a job one day maybe if fighting didn't work out for me. But when you have 1 foot in and 1 foot out the door, you're not really a professional, right? So to me, when I had turned pro a long time before that, but I was still working. For my first 3 pro fights, I was still working, doing jobs here, doing jobs there, doing whatever I could to earn a substantial amount of money to be able to survive doing what I'm doing. And then after my 3rd pro fight, I was just kind of like, fuck, I'm not where I want to be in life. I cannot half-ass this. I cannot wake up and think about my job being the most important thing or my responsibilities in life being the most important thing and expect to make it to the UFC as a fighter. So after my 3rd pro fight, I quit everything. Every single thing. I had a conversation with my parents that, I just quit my job. I'm done trying to make an effort for anything else in my life. That? Oh, we fight about it till today.
Really?
Yeah, till last night we were having a conversation. Yeah. But those conversations never end, man. Like, I mean, if you're a middle class Indian man that's hit 25 and he doesn't have a stable job, it raises a lot of questions in within your parents' community. Correct. parents' circles, and people talk. And unfortunately, people talking is something people can't handle.
And I think
Right.
one of the reasons it also being there are no examples out there to show that this is also a route or a way to, I don't know, you can call it a stable living, you can call it a success, you can call it whatever you want, but
Right.
just to live off of what you're doing. I don't think parents today have an example in front of them where they've seen a pro fighter within the community or within society that they live in to say, okay, we know that somebody has done it, so we can let my son do it, or things like that.
There's been tons of my parents' friends that have told me their sons that are significantly younger than me now want to get into MMA because of
Yeah.
the way I've spoken about the sport through the years doing it, showing them that there is
Correct,
this path.
correct.
Now, you know, from Pune, there are not many people that have done it the right way or have made it to whatever level consistently because life always got in the
Correct,
way, right?
correct.
And for a lot of people don't have the, you know, they don't have the resources to be able to survive that and get through that. Fortunately for me, I have a very supportive family that's always, even though they've told me not to do it, they've always ended up letting me do it and do it to a point where I give it 500%, not just 100%.
Yeah.
So gratitude is something that people need to learn to have, but also becoming that example that you can't find, it leaves you accountable to yourself where you have to do everything right for yourself. And it's not just a journey of self-improvement, because when there are people that are looking at you to do it in your sport that are scared to take those chances because nobody's done it before. Nobody said, fuck it, I'm going to fight. I grew up in this cushy household. I'm not going to do what my parents tell me to do. I'm going to do it. People thought it was a tantrum. People thought that this is all I wanted to do, and they thought that this is something that he's just saying up in the air.
Yeah.
And proving that every day was the first hurdle. So when people take it seriously today, I know that I did my job in terms of convincing people that I'm going to do it.
Correct.
Because
correct.
now I'm beyond balls deep in it. Whether I have a losing record or I have a winning record or whatever it is, I know that I'm 6 fights into my career and I am not turning back.
Yeah.
So coming to terms with that yourself needs to happen first, because if you can't face your parents and you can't face the people that are in the four walls of your own house, how the hell are you going to face the world?
Yeah.
Right?
Or yourself.
You have to be able to face yourself every day. So that's the battle. Like you versus you every day. You have to not do the wrong things. You have to not smoke and drink every time you feel like life is fucking you. You
Not
can't
use that as an escape.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And an escape is exactly what it is, because you stop thinking about what's actually important for some time, and that's that temporary comfort that people get.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest mistake an athlete can make, and especially an MMA athlete, because his or her health is everything in this sport.
All sports, no?
Definitely.
Yeah.
But there are so many things that when you go into a fight, you're already doubting so many things.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
there's so much on the line every single fight. And like I said, I've done every other sport. There are people that you can depend on in football. There are substitutes in fighting. If somebody substitutes you and somebody else fights in your place, they get the money that you were contracted for.
Correct.
Right? So it's every man for himself, every man and woman for themselves.
Yeah.
So that's what it is. And people don't like those odds. People don't like these losing odds. And even day before yesterday, when I was at my physiotherapist, he was like, why the fuck are you still doing this, bro? You're here for the second time in 2 months about a different knee. Like your only good leg is now fucked. So
like what? Can you give me a list of injuries that you have gone through?
I'll tell you about the good ones.
The good ones.
About the ones that were particularly hard to come back from.
So I know you've broken your MCL twice. That's on your left knee.
On my left knee, I broke my MCL twice, but I never got it formally diagnosed. How I knew it was broken was I'd gone to Indore for one of my nationals, and there was a system where they had everyday weigh-in. So you'd weigh in at 8 in the morning, like between 6 and 8 in the morning, and you'd fight at probably 11 a.m. and then you'd have the rest of the day to kind of rest, recover, cut weight again, make weight the next morning for that, for the second fight of the tournament. And you had 5 fights like that. So you were fighting 5 days in the week, 1 fight a day, but you have to make weight every single time.
Correct.
So on the first day I got a bye, and I was maybe 2.5 kilos overweight. Like every time I weighed in at 65.8 for my featherweight limit, and every time I ate my first meal, my weight would shoot up to 69 kgs because of the amount of water that I was taking in. So cutting 3-4 kilos became very hard on my body, and I didn't realize that the training camp that I was doing prior to that fight had already damaged my body quite a bit.
Yeah.
So I felt my knee go a couple of times, but I was like, fuck it, I'm going to tape it up, I'm going to be okay. I was cutting weight for this fight on the second day. So I got a bye on the first day. On the second day, I knew I had 2 fights that day, one in the morning, one in the evening. I was warming up to go run to cut weight in the morning at about 4:30 in the morning, and because I had to weigh in at 6 a.m. I was running half in my sleep because I hadn't eaten much, I hadn't drunk much water. I knew that I was only 2.5 kilos overweight, so I was gonna run, I was gonna get a sweat in, I was gonna go sit in the sauna and lose all the other weight. While I was warming up for my run, I felt my knee tweak a little bit, didn't make much of it. I started running, and about 3 kilometers on the treadmill into that run, my left knee caved inwards. This part of my knee went here, this part of my knee came out like that.
Yeah.
Definitely a break. But I'm like, fuck, I have to fight twice today. What am I going to do? I can't tell anybody about this because I've invested all this money as an amateur on my own to be able to come here. And I had taken my granddad with me, and he was sleeping in the hotel room, and I was in the hotel gym when this happened. He was sleeping in the hotel room, so I was like, fuck, I can't wake Nana up like this. And my Nana's come to me, he's come with me to every single amateur fight of mine since I started fighting. Even my boxing bouts. So he knows how to handle these things, but at that time, this was a particularly debilitating injury which would have pulled me out of that tournament. But this is one of those times where I decided to be too tough for my own good. So I put my leg against a wall, I smashed it back into place.
What?
I put kinesiology tape on it to kind of
On
hold
your
my
own?
knee together. Yeah, on my own. Luckily, I had it in my gym bag with me at the time. I couldn't walk up to my room
Yeah,
to get
but you knew how to.
Sorry?
You knew how to.
I knew. So I was working with this very good coach called Vinay Kadam.
Okay.
He's one of I think India's best strength and conditioning coaches who doesn't talk a lot, so you don't really hear about him. But his advice is always solid to me. So he was like, and he told me, he was like, if this knee tweaks, K-tape idhar lagane ka aur chup baithne ka, bas. So I put it over here, I put it over here, and I put it over here. I put my knee brace over it, and I went to the physiotherapist who was the doctor that day. Because if they saw that thing on my leg, they wouldn't let me fight. So I went to her, I said, ma'am, can I have some ice for my knee? I was warming up, I hurt my knee a little bit, but I'm okay to fight. She was like, okay, do 10 squats and show me that you're okay to fight. I'm like, okay. So I kept a straight face, I did 10 squats, screaming in pain in my head, and they let me fight the first fight. I come out of that fight, and because I'm so amped up and I was warming up and everything, I didn't really feel the pain, and I knocked the guy out in 6 seconds in the first fight of that tournament. The fight after that was the fight that my opponent and I both got fight of the tournament for. It was a 3-round war from start to finish, and this motherfucker just kept kicking my leg again and again and again and again. And at the end of that fight, my leg was absolutely toast. So he took off the doctor after that fight took off the brace. He was like, what the fuck did you do to your leg? Because my leg was dangling like this. So I said, I hurt my leg. So he was like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock, you obviously hurt your leg.
Yeah.
What happened? So I told him what happened in the morning, and then he just put ice on it, and they were sending me to a hospital that day. But since it was Indore, I didn't know anybody. I didn't want to go to some random hospital and get random treatment for it. So he got crutches. My granddad got me crutches. Came back from that completely battered, completely bruised. Again, I lost that by a split decision because I just couldn't move. Like, I couldn't bounce on this leg. And the guy that I fought was one of my good friends, Akash Gautam. He was the Khelo India silver medalist.
Okay.
In boxing.
Okay.
So his movement was excellent. He was a southpaw, and he was a great striker. But I knew that if I was able to move, I would have definitely outboxed him, out-wrestled him. I tried to take him down twice in that fight. I got him down twice, reverse position a few times, but my knee was taking an absolute beating in that fight. So I tried my best not to think about it, because every time I bent my leg, I had this, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe like an 8 kind of pain shooting through my leg the entire time. And keeping your composure for 3 minutes for 3 rounds, I don't think anybody should go through that.
Yeah,
it was a very stupid thing that I did, but today I'm thankful that I have a very cool story out of it.
Yeah. At least that.
If you can't do what I do, definitely don't do what I did.
Yeah.
At all, because it's not a very safe thing to do. It's not a very sane thing to do. And I never told my parents about any of this. I just said I hurt my leg in the fight.
Yeah.
So insurance would pay for it. But whatever treatment I needed, I always got, and I was always very good at fixing these injuries, and my body thankfully always cooperated with me.
Yeah.
So I knew that if there was that intention to fix it and go fight again, I needed 3 weeks to be able to to restart, restart and get to training again. Getting to training was the hardest part because my body was falling apart at the time. Second leg injury, but that was much later. I'll tell you about another good one. My neck. Now, in June of last year, probably just about a year ago, maybe a couple of days from now will be 1 year that this neck injury happened. I got caught in a choke when I was doing my training camp in Bombay, and I was training for one of the biggest fights of my life in Nepal. And I was doing my camp in Bombay for this, and one of my training partners caught me in a submission called a guillotine, in which your head is stuck under the guy's armpit and he's trying to choke you, and you're on top of him.
Yeah.
I was on top of him and he was on the bottom, and he had wrapped his legs around me. So it was a
But
very tight
you were
choke.
on the floor, standing.
No, we were on the floor.
Huh.
So I had him down, and that's how I was fighting the choke. So I kept fighting his hand, so his
Yeah.
hand couldn't sneak under my neck, and I fought the choke. For 1 second, I let go of his hand, and he just yanked my neck in the wrong way. My L1, at like doctor said something, I forgot what it's called, but he said that this could potentially end your fighting career.
Yeah.
So you need to calm the fuck down. You need to chill. You need to go back home. You cannot go for this.
And
fight.
this wasn't even in a fight; it was in a practice
This was in
session.
practice.
Yeah.
So oftentimes preparing for a fight is much harder than actually going into competition and fighting somebody, because all the hard work is done before the fight. In the fight, you're only showing what you've done all through that camp.
Yeah.
Right? So that camp was particularly one of my hardest ones, because my opponent also he fought at one championship recently. The guy that I was supposed to fight at the time, Rabindra Dhant. One day we'll probably fight again, maybe later down the road, because he's done exceptionally well in his career. I'd argue that it was a very padded record. He's fought people that weren't as good as him, and I'm no one to say that, because I've not had a very good record. But I know for a fight that I know for a fact that I wouldn't be an easy fight for him, and
Okay.
I was preparing for it. I was preparing for him like it.
Yeah.
And this was, everybody said it was a banger of a matchup, because I was looking to make my comeback after getting knocked out the first time. But you realize when you push yourself more than your body can handle, sometimes your mind doesn't always catch up in that recovery. So you might always be in fight mode even after that, while you're fighting that injury or while you're recovering from that injury. You tend to go a little crazy because of it. I hadn't fully recovered from that neck injury, and I took another fight in October. And I got knocked out in that fight again. And that was my second loss as a professional. So I was at this point 1 win, 2 losses. In the first loss, I got concussed really, really badly, because I had cut a bunch of weight for the fight. After the second loss, I fought again maybe 2 months later in Assam. So I was taking these fights really, really, really close to each other, because when I wasn't training for a fight, I was in my own head the whole time.
Yeah.
And 2023 wasn't exactly a highlight reel of a year for me, but it definitely opened up my eyes to a lot of things about the world of MMA.
And how much time do you think is necessary or crucial post a fight to recover, train, and be ready for the next fight?
It depends on whether your training camp was really, really tough for the fight and the fight was tough at the same time. So if you have a tough training camp and you have a tough fight, definitely take 1 to 2 months off between those fights.
That's it. 1 to 2 months.
1 to 2 months of hard training cannot happen, because you need your body to recover from that. And it's when you get into a fight, I don't know if fighters have seen it this way or other people have spoken about it this way, but to me, it's always been like PTSD, because when you think about that, your heart rate elevates. You start, because it matters so much to you, right? Your heart rate elevates. You start to get anxious. You start to get twitchy. You start to go back into fight mode when you think about preparing for a fight.
Before a fight, definitely, I'm sure that must be happening. What about after the fight?
You mean nervousness?
Nervousness, the twitchiness, the increase in heart rate.
I'm talking about even when you're recovering from an injury after a fight.
Really?
Yeah, because that doesn't just go away. Like,
and the
you think
anxiousness
about
is still
that
there.
fight, you watch the fight as many times as you possibly can. Because I've lost a bunch of fights in the recent, in these recent 2 years.
Yeah.
I'm somebody that beats myself up about these things, so I obsess over what I did wrong and never try to make those mistakes again. So I'll rewatch it again and again and again, pause it every time I think I went wrong somewhere, and be like, shoot, don't do that again. Make notes.
Yeah.
Don't do that again in training. And maybe on a day where I'm feeling off, sometimes that subconsciously plays on my brain, so I'll make those mistakes again and then write it down 10 times to not make those mistakes again. But this is, how you callous your hands when you lift weights. It's kind of like callousing your brain every single time you step into competition, because oftentimes when you don't callous your brain, and your brain is a very fragile thing, it will make you lose that battle even before it's fought. So being able to keep yourself confident while preparing for it and trying to stay humble at the same time, it's a very tough balance to try and strike, because you have to walk into the gym being very sure about your abilities, but you can't walk into the gym thinking you're better than everybody, right?
Yeah.
And thinking you can survive things that you really can't. Like that choke, it almost ended my career.
Correct.
And it wasn't the smartest thing to do necessarily, but I think that it's a lesson that I've taken from in not pushing myself past a certain point in training. So I know there are certain barriers which I have to break in a healthy way, not just injure myself and call myself a badass and talk about it like an idiot on a podcast. But you learn to be very clear about all these things with yourself, so you can give people this advice.
Like you said, before a fight, there's a training camp.
Right.
So before the training camp, what does your daily schedule look like as of now?
Fairly standard. Well, right now,
I mean, not now that you're injured, not right now,
Yeah, but
because I'm sure it'll be physio.
on a normal day, shit, it's been so long since I've even thought about this. But when I'm not in training camp, since I'm not doing anything else except MMA now, it's very hard to explain that. But when I was in Bombay and I was doing my training camp, my hours of training was so long, even though I wasn't in training camp at a certain point. Like my first training of the day was from 12 to 4 and then 8 to 11 at night. So you only had the hours in the day to sleep and recover and eat.
Yeah,
That's literally all my day looked like in Bombay. I would wake up at around 10 o'clock in the morning, eat something, 11 start warming my body up, doing some mobility work, stabilizing all the weak parts of my body, using the rubber bands, just doing everything to warm your body up before you get to the gym. Because when you get to the gym, you have to do a lot of dynamic warm-ups, a lot of rolling, a lot of tumbling, a lot of wrestling drills, awkward movements, and stuff that your body is not naturally meant to do, but it has to kind of come like second nature. So your body has to be ready when you step in the gym. Understanding that a pro athlete has to live like that even in their off season. With MMA, there's not really an off season, because if you get a call for a fight, guess what? You're fucking preparing for the fight. You have to start thinking about cutting weight for the fight. You have to start thinking about making the weight limit for your weight class, right? So you have to start thinking about everything that you have to do right, how every training session is going to count here on in. And that in itself is so much pressure where you tend to beat yourself in your head before it even starts.
So 10 o'clock, wake up, 11 o'clock, you start your warming up, movement, rolling, activation.
12 o'clock to 4 o'clock training.
So what do you mean by training?
The first training of the day, on different days it was like different things, but it was primarily MMA based in the afternoon, and if we had to work on a different specific aspect of MMA in the evening from 8 to 11 at night, it was either jiu-jitsu or striking.
So 12 to 4 was the first session, and then between 4 and 8,
between 4 and 8 I'd sleep, recover, eat.
Yeah.
And 7:30 I'd get to the gym, start warming up in the gym, just start moving around, fucking around with everybody.
8 o'clock.
And 8 o'clock we'd start.
Yeah.
Bang on time, 8 o'clock every day. And in Bombay, fuck, if you're not on time, the work culture and the MMA culture is almost alike. Like if you don't make it if you don't make it to work on time, you might as well not come.
Yeah.
Right? But you show up to work anyway. Even though the traffic's bad, even though the rains are really, really bad sometimes. So people find a way to make it from different parts of Bombay. Thankfully, my house was only 200 meters from the gym.
Yeah.
My granddad's house where I was staying. So I was very blessed that way, because in Bombay it's not easy to get around.
Yeah. So, and then 8 to 11 was another session.
8 to 11 was another session, but that session was specific to us working on whatever niches and systems that we were working through at that time. The afternoon sessions were usually the hard sessions where you get the hard work done, where you have to drill a couple of movements over several hundred times in however many rounds you do. So it was mostly just drilling in the afternoon.
Yeah.
In the evenings, it was skill-based work. It was a lot of active live rounds, and this was twice a day, 7 days a week. So you had to pick your day off, and you only got one day off in the week. So you had to show up to training fully fit, fully recovered, and fully capable of being able to keep up in training. And the weather in Bombay and the pollution in Bombay is such where you can't keep up with it most times. And I was constantly getting injured because of it. Maybe because I was neglecting a lot of parts of my life, but nonetheless, I was still getting injured, so I had to keep taking care of myself in that way.
And what about now? Now that I think you started hitting the gym a lot more often, you started lifting a little weight, doing some calisthenics.
I've always been, lifting weights, but most of it was with my, with my ex-strength and conditioning coach Vinay Kadam. We were only doing a lot of compound movements to keep my body healthy and to keep my body moving. So my body didn't completely fall apart when I was training. It was nothing was for aesthetics, nothing was for specific body parts, nothing, probably besides the squat, because he said my hips and my legs needed to be as strong as possible because I'm a fighter.
Yeah.
So that got me out of the bad habit of not liking leg day. I've learned to love leg days. I probably have 2 leg days a week, maybe 3 leg days a week if I'm feeling good now. But nowadays I'm trying to lift a little more because I don't have a fight planned that's coming up in the in the near future. So I'm training strength and conditioning almost every day. That's probably 6 times a week. We have a push-pull leg split. So my coach Kazim Haji, he's Ismail Haji's little brother.
Okay.
So he's my strength and conditioning coach, and he understands what fighters go through because his brother was literally the OG of MMA in Pune.
Yeah.
So if he ever has a question about something, I'm sure he has to ask his brother about it. Or I'm sure he does have that knowledge, but they more or less have the same face. So the way I respond to them, even when they abuse me or they shout at me or they say "Kya dhilla jaisa kar raha" or some shit like that, Like if they ever shout at me, I know that my brain is trained to listen to that face.
Correct,
So
correct.
listen to it, do it, be scared of it, do what you have to get through it. So I'm doing a lot of strength and conditioning now. I'm working my MMA for some time on my own because I had these injuries to overcome. But doing calisthenics, understanding how my body is supposed to move and how somebody's body can move with their own body weight, like muscle bar has been a huge help with this, because even the coaches over there, they're very helpful when you're doing something, and they can see that you're doing it wrong from a distance. Like they'll come, they'll give you advice, they'll be nice about it, they won't judge you for it. Whereas if you go to other gyms, a lot of those trainers are standing in the corner making fun of you. Like if you go to a public gym, a lot of those trainers are making fun of you and talking shit. And it doesn't matter what other people say, but to somebody that's new in the gym and to somebody that doesn't understand those things and who doesn't have 23-inch biceps because they pump steroids 24/7, they don't know how to process what these meatheads are saying, right? So having people also from the same background that have chosen to do fitness over there, it gives a certain amount of relatability to it, which made me have a lot of comfort with it.
Correct.
My girlfriend, she is the youngest calisthenics female athlete in this country, and her name is Kimaya Harnik, and she's been such a huge inspiration for me, because before I met her, I was not in a very good place in life, and I was finding it very hard to find the point in doing things. And even when we were friends before that, she'd always believe in me as a friend, as a fellow athlete, as somebody that's trying to make it to the top of the world and doing what she's doing. So having somebody like that in your corner to feed off of 24/7, and a lot of my sessions I went and I did with her. Like there were so many things I couldn't do. I couldn't do muscle ups prior to this. Now I can do muscle ups, no problem. I got my first ring muscle up the other day.
Nice.
So that was a huge thing for me, because when I was 17, 18 and I saw these guys with massive muscles and steroids pumped into their body doing these ring muscle ups so effortlessly and so smoothly, and posting it on Instagram and getting girls, and all of that made me feel very insignificant at that time, because the superficial shit like that matters to you when you're very young. And it's very hard to tell what's real and what's not real when you're that young. But today at 25, when I can do these things, and I can, all it takes is a little technique and a little guidance, and not for people to judge you. So you want to kind of be that change in the world that you wish you had.
Correct.
Right? So it makes you have a deeper appreciation for people that do these things and post online and do have this physical skill set and talent in them. But it's all hard work. Like you realize that nobody's talented. Everybody just works their fucking asses off.
Yeah. Any pre-match or pre-fight routine that you follow to get in the zone, or to get over the nerves?
I listen to Miley Cyrus.
You listen to Miley Cyrus?
But sometimes. Have you heard The Climb? It's
So, but I don't think that's going to pump you up for a fight.
No,
I mean,
before a fight, I'll be really honest, bro. I'm very, very scared. Like I'm really nervous before a fight, because so much. Like, as I've spoken for about an hour on this podcast about nothing in particular, vented on this podcast about all these feelings that fighting gives you. All these feelings lead up to that moment. So it's because so much is on the line, I'm always extremely nervous for this fight. Like for whichever fight that I have to be a part of. And it's not, there's no set routine. Like there's no set routine that's prove 100% of the time that it's going to win me this fight. But I do look for certain mental ticks in my head. Like I listen to a certain song, it'll put me in a certain zone. I'll warm up for some time, I'll listen to the other song that I have planned. But most of it has to do with like AC/DC, Guns N' Roses, stuff like that. Because I grew up listening to a lot of classic rock, blues, and I performed in bands growing up. So if it wasn't for MMA, I would have probably gone into music. But,
okay.
Songs like that always pump me up, because I used to perform them in front of a crowd, and I was kind of okay performing in front of a crowd, not being part of a crowd, if you get what I mean, right? Like if basically what I'm saying is if the attention was on me, I like it. So as introverted as I am. But before a fight, I'm always trying to stay as neutral as possible, because if you're too excited, you're going to end up doing something you don't want to do. And if you're too scared, you're going to hesitate to do things you have to do.
Correct.
So staying neutral is something that I found one of the toughest things to be in when you are a part of a sport that has chins met with shins every single time you step into the cage. Like somebody's leg is flying at your face, somebody's fist is flying at your face, somebody's taking you down and pounding you. It's very hard to stay calm in moments like that, but you think about doing your warm-up properly. Then you think about slowing down time a little bit. So when you get into your stance, you get into your flow, you try to get into a flow state just through going through the motions in those moments. you see that time kind of slows down. So when your opponent is in front of you and he's screaming and shouting and he's trying to mad dog you in front of the whole world, and it's just you and him in that cage, and everything you've done has led up to that moment, everything he's done has led up to this moment, and all that referee has to say is fight, for both of our truths to come out in front of everybody. So that's a lot of pressure to deal with. And I realize I've over-explained the shit out of this, but that is truly how it does feel to me. So I'm just trying to stay as neutral as possible, because I need to carry these feelings into the fight to be able to get me through the fight. But I can't carry these feelings being heavier than than the abilities that I've worked to be able to showcase in this fight. Like, they can't weigh me down. These feelings can't weigh me down. They have to push me forward. So learning how to wield these feelings in the right way is something that I'm constantly trying to do.
Correct.
Whether it's through a song, whether it's through having a conversation with coaches, whether it's me just trying to have a conversation with myself and be like, bro, it's fine, fuck it, it's cool. If you don't, if this doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. You need to be safe at the end of this fight. And on the flip side of that, there's this part of me that's like, motherfucker, you are willing to die right here, right now, because you have something to prove to yourself. And that comes out every single time I fight. So whether that's been my downfall or that's been the only reason I've kept going, I still don't know. But every day I'm trying to find that out.
It's finding the balance between both, where okay, it's not the end of everything if I don't win, but I'm going to die to win.
Right.
I think finding a balance between the two is, I think, every athlete's dream.
One thing it's taught me is I will go down swinging. I won't go down. I won't tap. I won't do any of those things. I won't quit in front of the whole world. Like, he's going to have to kill me to stop me.
Correct.
And every fight that I've lost, I've been finished in. So unless I'm physically unable to continue, I will keep continuing and I'll keep showing up for these fights. And whether my body or my mind hasn't been ready, I've always shown up for these fights, because that's what I signed on to do. And this is what I went mostly against my parents, against the rest of the world for. And when you quit every job and you kind of back yourself into this corner, you kind of have no other option to do that. Like, you realize very quickly that you're not very good at other things, or you're not very good at wanting to be good at other things. So till that want to be good at something else comes, this is all I'm going to do.
And so I know that you're going through an injury currently, which you picked up last week in a training camp. But once you get out of the injury, what's next? What's the next aim? What's the next goal? Short term, long term, what's more?
So the one thing I've tried to correct is finding a team that I wanted to work with. I'm going to be working with Kaizen MMA in Bangalore.
Okay.
My coach, Piyush Pandey, him and I had a conversation after my last loss about the fight. And he was like, see, there are things that are broken in your game that I feel we can fix. And he's built more or less like me. He's lanky. He's kind of tall for his weight class. I'm kind of tall for my weight class. So he understands how people built like me fight, and working enough to get into a good position in the way that I fight. Now, I'm not a grappler. I'm not a wrestler. I'm not even built like one. So I don't have the physical capabilities to be able to turn myself into a wrestler. My body is not even built like that. So, because being a wrestler requires you to be, requires you to have a lot of fast twitch muscle, a lot of muscle, and unfortunately for me, my body can't build muscle that easily, or that much muscle that easily without putting on much weight. So because I've had to maintain a weight class, because I've had to stay under a certain weight limit, it's always been me trying to fight this superficial need for having muscles, and also this real need for being able to perform very, very well. So this coach has made me try to eradicate this completely from my head. Like, see, I get lost talking about this also. But this coach has helped me try to eradicate this from my head, where he's like, work on your skills, get to a good position, fight where you are good. So for 1 week every month, I'm going to go to Bangalore. I'm going to learn new things. And my team in Pune has agreed to help me in terms of me, being able to drill those things that I've learned over here. For the rest of the 3 weeks of the month that I'm here. So I get to spend time at home, and I get to spend full time away in a camp as well for a week. And it's not that much time away from home, so I still get to be there for my family when they need me. I still get to be here when people need me. And that's the whole reason I'm here.
And when do you see yourself fighting next?
Aiming to fight sometime at the end of July, if all works out the way I want it to, but I need to let this knee recover first. The next 2 weeks are going to be dedicated to this knee getting back to 100% health, since it's just a sprain. I know that if I ice it a couple of times a day, I know that if I take the right kind of medicine that the doctor's given me to take, it's going to be good, and I can always start from scratch again. Because for me, when I'm doing a fight camp, if I have a solid 6 weeks, I'm good. I don't need those 8-week, 12-week training camps where you kind of burn your body out, burn your mind out. And my mind right now doesn't have the capability to handle a 12-week camp.
Correct.
So You need to understand where you're good, where you peak, and peaking at the right time to
Yeah,
fight.
and what works for you.
Exactly.
Like
Everybody's different. Like,
a 12 week might work for somebody else, but a
Exactly.
6-week camp is working for you.
also the significance of how the physical demands of a sport are,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
what your body is used to and what it's not used to. You can't suddenly put your body through like 12 weeks of absolute hell when it's not used to going through
Yeah.
2 weeks of possible hell, right? So building that capability of being able to do well over a longer period of time is what I found fitness to be. Not just having the biggest muscles, not just having the endless cardio, not just having the skill set to match all of those things up.
Correct.
It needs to work in unison together, but it also needs to have a good balance and work in terms of longevity.
Correct.
To me, that's what fitness is.
Okay. Nice. So, just before we end, what I ask all my athletes to do is we've broken down the physical and the mental aspects of every sport. And we kind of ask the athletes to rate their sport. Endurance,
And so many different parts of your body have to work at the same time in different ways, like fast twitch muscle needs to work, and having the ability to be able to perform in those ways endurance wise needs to be there as a bare minimum. So 10,
strength,
like a 7.
speed and power,
For your speed and power to match up properly, I think maybe like also an 8.
mobility, flexibility,
6,
agility,
maybe like an 8.
the skill that is involved or the learning curve.
At least for 3 months, because those 3 months are going to shape your personality into something that's very different from what even a lot of pro fighters are doing right now.
Okay.
Consistently showing up, consistently doing their job, but still I think it's a 10 on 10.
So there's one part that we had added to this that was chances of injury, and I think that's a 11 on 10. Yeah.
There's no number large enough for that.
There are certain sports where environmental factors take.
I think like a 5 for MMA because it is indoors and you can control a lot indoors.
Yeah. What about body composition?
Like a 5 or a 6.
And then we added one aspect in this, especially for your sport, which was contact.
A 10.
That'll be a 10
That's the
on
whole
10.
sport, because if the guys just dance around each other, they might as well be on TV
Correct.
on another channel.
Yeah. You're looking at 80.
80.
80 on 100. 80 on 100 is
That's
what
the
we're
highest
looking
marks
at.
I've got since like first standard.
First standard. 80 on 100
Yeah.
is what we're looking at. And just for reference, badminton had a 72.
Damn.
Cricket had a 69. So I think MMA does come a little higher on the chart as compared to badminton and cricket in terms of difficulty, just for the brutalness.
Even fitness wise, like I think so many more aspects of your body have to be built for MMA, for you to be successful in MMA as compared to any of these sports, because these sports don't require you to put yourself in actual danger. Like cricket, I'm a horrible Indian because I really don't like cricket. Like it's a sport I can't stand watching. I can't stand when people watch it, and I can't stand I can't understand the hype around it.
Yeah.
Because it's grown men in colorful clothes.
Yeah.
I mean, we fight in our underwear. I'm nobody to speak.
Yeah.
But it's grown men in colorful clothes that have sort of below average fitness. There's no crazy physical demand that sport requires you. Requires you to have, besides probably being able to stand in the sun for long hours at time.
If you have to play cricket for India, it is one of the toughest things
100%.
to achieve
Yeah.
across any sport in the world.
One, because of the sheer number of people that try to do it.
Exactly.
Two,
The number of aspects that you need to overcome, whether it's politics, whether it's competition, it's harder to get into the Indian cricket team than it is to get into any university, any educational
also,
institute.
why do you think so many Indians play in other countries' teams?
Yeah.
It's just
It's
you're Indian,
ridiculously,
chal,
yeah.
They don't even show their cricket abilities. They show their report cards and walk in there. But no, I only hate on cricket because I suck at cricket, bro. It's not a sport I've ever been able to be good at. So I've just and there's just been so much hype around it, where sports like boxing or wrestling or anything like that, which requires, why so many wrestlers keep crying about different things that they don't get, and not crying in a disrespectful sense, but crying in a sense of actual pain, because their sport requires so much more physically, mentally, emotionally from their sport than cricket does. And cricket still gets the kind of funding that it does, and it's the most famously corrupt sport in the whole world, and that's something nobody can deny. And that's the reason I didn't like that's the reason I didn't stick with doing boxing, because in India it is also still very, very corrupt. Even across the world it is. even at the highest level, as professional boxers, people have to face politics. So it's just something that I never wanted to be a part of. MMA was one sport that was so green when I first started doing it, that people had to be fair because people are trying to find good fighters. So I always kind of just stuck with it.
Yeah.
Now people are surpassing that level. Now people are trying to do even better. There are so many people in my gym that are physically better than I am at what I do. But what matters is when you're doing that round, you need to be able to put it together and use your skills well enough against the other person's skills.
Correct.
So experience, composure, stuff like that is what I draw my inspiration from to be able to be fit and perform better.
Yeah.
Because if you're jittery, you're not going to be able to perform better.
Yeah, and it's not only like you saw the aspects that we rated it on. It's not just physical.
Exactly.
Yeah, there are so many other aspects to performing at the highest level.
I think wrestling is the toughest thing you can do. Like in terms of the sheer workload.
Yeah.
In terms of the amount of reps, amount of minutes that there are in a round for sparring and wrestling and stuff like that. Like it's just the toughest thing you can do because all you have to do is just go. And in that sport, who can do more is who's going to do better. And who's got that dog in him is going to do better.
Yeah.
In MMA, you still have in MMA, you still have that breathing room of being able to strike, fuck somebody up with a strike, make him think twice. In wrestling, you just have to grab each other and hopefully the other, you end up on top.
Yeah. I'm sure I'm going to have a wrestler and we'll get him to rate his sport as well. So
in terms of the sport being hard, I wouldn't give it to anything else except wrestling. Anything.
I don't know.
Anything in this
we'll have
world.
To see.
Anything.
We'll have to see.
Wrestlers are the best overall athletes, including gymnasts, including triathletes, including every single other sport. You can put a wrestler, you can send a wrestler on a 21-kilometer run. He'll run it with no problem. You can make him do as many push-ups as somebody that does calisthenics can do. He'll outdo the push-ups. You can ask him to do maybe not pull-ups because it's not a skill that requires that you require to fight,
wrestling.
right? Yeah. But they'll have a certain amount of pull ability to be able to hold and keep you there.
Correct.
They can lift a significant more
Yeah,
amount of weight than most weightlifters do.
Yeah.
Very naturally. Their balance is far better than most gymnasts I've seen. Their stability in their shoulders has to be really, really good compared to a lot of golfers. Their mobility in their hips, again, better than golfers because their demand is far more. Their recovery might be more shit than golfers because golfers have more recovery time and more avenues to do recovery. And I've trained with a bunch of golfers too. This is how I know. So I think wrestling just takes the cake overall. And every one of those things on that list is going to be just 10. Why the fuck is this even on the list? 10. So
I'll have to get a wrestling athlete now just to
just YouTube Bajrang Punya's wrestling routine. Just do that. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And I don't even do wrestling formally, but I know what it takes because I've been to these wrestling akhadas and I'm like, fuck, sucks to be you, bro. I would not want to do so many push-ups. Thank you.
Makes sense. Anyway, it was awesome having you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for such a open, brilliant conversation.
I hope everybody here today has learned something about MMA, has learned what it takes to be an MMA fighter.
Definitely, and I hope I'm going to come and train with you sometime soon.
Come.
Don't break my nose the first time I come.
Bro, I need to not try to break some of my own limbs and body parts, so it's okay. Just come. It'll be fun.
Yeah, but definitely I'm going to see you in the gym very soon.
Definitely.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
Player Bishops never let our colors fall.